What's up guys, this is Jan for Chess24, and in this video we shall take a look at the game number 7 of the ongoing World Championship match between Grandmaster and World Champion Magnus Carlsen and his challenger Sergey Karjakin. Tense match so far, with both sides missing chances, Magnus missing big chances in games 3 and 4, while Karjakin missing a big chance in game number 5. Game number 6, Karjakin had the white pieces but did not really get anywhere. So in game number 7, Karjakin repeats the white pieces, typical feature for World Championship matches. One player has the same color in rounds 6 and 7, and then they start alternating again. After a rest day, we were curious to see what Karjakin and his team of helpers would come up with white, and the answer was the move 1d4 for the first time in this match. Karjakin chooses not to move his e-pawn. He's played 1e4 3 times, and now he wants to test the world champion in 1d4. Magnus Carlsen goes for 1d5, which qualifies as a minor surprise. Of course, he's done this in the past, but his main repertoire is d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and after knight c3 to play the Nimzo Indian with bishop to b4. After knight f3, he's preferred the move d5, the queen's gambit. But for this game, Magnus Carlsen decides to play what we like to call the Slav defense. d4, d5, c4, c6. Time-honored, very solid defense, as we can see by this expertly drawn arrow. This bishop still has the chance to enter the game on this diagonal. That's the plus c6 has over e6, while black keeps the tension in the center for now. Karjakin plays a move 3 knight c3, which is already a small tip-off that he does not want to play the mainline Slav, but he wants to continue with e3. And the reasoning is, if you want to play the mainline Slav, you normally play knight f3, knight f6, and now knight c3. When after d takes c4, you reach the mainline Slav, while after e6 you reach what we call the semi-Slav. And a6 is, what's this called? I think this is all called the Chebanenko Slav. We're gonna return to that topic. The reason that white normally doesn't start with knight c3 if he wants to have that position, because in the game after knight f6, of course he could go knight f3, is that knight c3 gives black an additional option of going d takes c4, which is not the end of the world, leads to sharp play, and most top players don't do this. But why allow this if you are opting for that position with knight f3, knight c3? Hence, knight c3 means after knight f6, white goes e3 and is trying to play a slightly different type of line. Here it does matter as well that you started with the knight here and not the knight here, because if black tries to play the typical Slav move bishop to f5, then white goes cd5, cd5 and queen to b3, targeting this pawn. And it's important here that this pawn is also under attack, so black can't just go because of knight takes d5. Of course, theory continues, and there's moves here as well. Bishop back to c8 is possible, knight c6, a pawn sacrifice is possible. But Magnus Carlsen has no desire to find out what's going on there, and instead plays a slightly cryptic move, or at least it might look so, the move a6, which, as mentioned, we also refer to as Chebanenko Slav, after the famous chess coach Chebanenko, who came up with all these a6s. The move, it's not 100% clear what it accomplishes, but it's a useful multi-purpose move. Sometimes black wants to go b5, which is prepared by a6. Sometimes you want to develop this bishop and meet queen b3 with rook to a7 to cover this pawn, which you can only do after you played a6. And sometimes it's just useful to have this b5 square covered, so you don't run into any knight b5s or cd bishop b5s. So it's a useful little waiting move, also asking white to show his hand. And Karjakin shows his hand with the also little known move bishop to d3. The main line here is the move knight to f3, when black has a choice between b5, prepared by a6, bishop to f5, as mentioned. a6 also has the plus after queen b3, you can go rook a7 or b5, or the move e6, which Vishy Anand played in his last World Championship match that he won against Boris Gelfand. Yeah, they had a couple games here with b3, queen c2 and c5. Gelfand finally managed to win a game with c5 and Anand stopped playing this. But Karjakin, no desire to find out which of these lines Magnus Carlsen has prepared. He plays the move bishop to d3, of course stops bishop to f5. And Carlsen, after some thought, goes for d takes c4, arguing this bishop has moved already. I am gonna make it move again, so you lose a tempo. Bishop takes c4, e6. That's not the end of the story, because after knight f3, black goes c5, losing a tempo himself with his c-pawn. And now, how do I explain this best? We've reached a position that you normally get from the queen's gambit declined, but with one significant difference. I'm going to show you one more move, castles here, and then I'm going to back up to explain why this line makes sense for black and what the difference is. You normally get this position after d4, d5, c4, d takes c4, knight f3, knight f6, e3, e6, bishop takes c4, c5, castles, a6, and here we see this knight is not on c3 yet. The main moves in this position are moves like bishop to b3, bishop to d3, queen to e2, d takes c5. Many options here, but knight c3 is not considered to be one of them, because if the knight goes to c3, it can often get hit by b5 and sometimes a later b4. It's not considered to be ideal. However, in our game continuation, let's not forget white played knight c3 on move 3 already. Of course, there is no way back for this knight, and therefore this version of events is considered to be quite pleasant for black. Of course, play continues after castles b5, bishop to e2 was played by Karjakin. This is sort of, I believe, a bit of a new trend that this bishop goes to e2, where it has hopes to one day occupy the f3 square, and white says, I don't mind the exchange of queens on the d file in many lines, and I will hope to prove that you've weakened your queen side by playing a6 and b5 so early. Bishop b7, d takes c5, and here, yeah, the most normal move, or the most standard move maybe, would be queen takes d1, rook takes d1, bishop takes c5, and white would try to justify his opening play by a typical maneuver like knight d2, followed by knight to b3, when I'm not sure if it's serious, but you can try to poke some weaknesses into the black position by going a4, and maybe white has some chances for an advantage here. Anyway, Magnus Carlsen did not want any part of this, instead blitzed out a more ambitious move, the move knight to c6. His point is he doesn't want to give up the d-file without a fight, and after queen takes d8 he wants to be ready to play rook takes d8 and then recapture this pawn on c5. If he were allowed to do that without being bothered, he wouldn't have a problem, so the computer suggests to do exactly that, take on d8, and now try to bother black before he's ready. One line he gives is a4, b4 and knight to b5. Looks spectacular, piece sacrifice, but after a takes b, white would win his piece back instantly, because you can't leave these pawns on the board forever. And after bishop takes c5, bc, bishop c6, white is maybe a tad better here, because this pawn is a little weak. White has a small lead in development, knight e5, knight d4, rook a5 are all options, so black still would have to defend. Another option is also given by the computer, the move knight e4, which could lead to very sharp play after knight c7 check, king to d7, knight takes a6, rook to a8. This knight is trapped, but white is pawn up, 2 pawns up, has another resource here, bishop to b5. And my computer says that the best move is rook takes a6 here, bishop takes a6, knight e5, not a great idea. After rook takes a6, knight e5 check. The line continues a bit. My computer gives a small advantage for white, but I'm sure this could be analyzed further, leads to a big mess. So Karjakin could have tried this, or another move indicated by the computer, the interesting move b4. Looks ridiculous because black can just take it, but after knight takes b4, a4 undermines the black queen side, and the point is that now this pawn cannot advance to the b4 square anymore, because, well, the knight is there. So that was another try for maybe a small advantage, but instead Karjakin, probably surprised by the move knight to c6, went for the move knight to d2. Typical maneuver which we've already seen in these endgame positions, but this is not an endgame yet, and after bishop takes c5, it looked pretty clear that Carlsen had solved his opening prompts. After knight to b3, which is a typical maneuver for these lines, black would probably not go for the endgame anymore, but instead keep the queens on the board by playing bishop to d6. Since this knight has moved around quite a bit, this looks like a very pleasant situation for black, because with queens on the board, these weaknesses on the queen side aren't so relevant, and instead black can just develop very quickly and try to generate an initiative. Therefore, Karjakin decided to make sure the queens come off the board with knight d4, stopping bishop d6. But this is hardly playing for an advantage. And after knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop e7, the eye test already confirms that black is at least equal. And actually, white has to be a little careful. He's behind in development. Black has his bishop out. White doesn't yet. So he starts to rectify that situation by playing b3. Carlsen tries to use the bit of momentum he has by playing knight to b4, attacking this knight on e4 before white is fully developed. Bishop f3, logical defense, sets up to go knight f6 or knight d6 with the discovered check in a bunch of variations, targeting this bishop on b7. And the world champion plays a fairly natural move, the move castles, but yet an option here to play a bit more sharply by playing f5, which was mentioned by our friend Peter Svidler on our live broadcast. One point is knight d6, queen takes d6, bishop takes b7, rook a7, which on paper looks good for white because he's achieved to get the two bishops, but black still has a lingering lead in development, for example after bishop f3. That would lead to an extra pawn after takes, bishop f6, hitting this rook. Then knight takes a2, rook b1, knight takes a2, with a serious advantage for black. White can do a little better by not going bishop f3, but instead the move a3. But black would still reach a pleasant endgame after takes. Let's say bishop here forces this rook off the a file. Bishop f6, rook b1, takes. And black is a little better here because these pawns are weaker than these pawns. Still, first of all, this is not too serious. Secondly, white had another option, the move knight to g5, bishop f3, knight f3. And white should defend this position. However, if anybody's better, it's black. Here, same thing, takes, bishop f6, and black is more comfortable. So maybe Magnus missed a chance here to complicate things a little bit, because after castles, Karjakin played a precise move, bishop to a3. Bishop b2 might look more natural, but after bishop b2, takes, rook f d8. Once again, only black can be better, because this d3 square. Bit of a nuisance. Nice move, neutralizing the pressure. And Carlsen, quite surprisingly, commits a very serious inaccuracy in this position. He plays the move rook to c8. Does not do anything for this bishop. A more logical move, to my mind, would be the move bishop d5, just stabilizing this bishop. And here, I'm mainly showing you this because white is a nice way to simplify, which I thought deserved inclusion in this video. It's the move knight to f6 check. This is not losing a piece because after gf6, bishop takes b4, bishop takes b4, bishop takes d5, queen takes d5. White wins his piece back with queen g4 check and equality. While after bishop takes f6, bishop takes b4, white is also fine since he can capture a rook of his own. Still, it would have been white who would have to make sure he equalizes here. Same thing can be said about a move like rook b8, just covering this bishop. Well, after rook c8, it looked like Carlsen miscalculated something, because Karjakin turns the tables here, goes knight f6 check, and now it is black that has to be very, very careful to stay in the game. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes b7, and once again the tactics work out for white, because even though both sides managed to capture a lot of things here after bishop a1, bishop b4, white targets both rooks and the bishops, making sure he gets his material back, and he keeps a bit of an initiative. This is actually, initiative is the wrong word, but I'll explain it now. This is actually a tough spot for Carlsen. If you want to keep equal material, you have to go for something like rook to b8, bishop takes f8, queen takes d1, rook takes d1, rook takes b7, bishop to b4. It's best to keep the bishops on the board. Rook a1, king f8 is fairly equal. But bishop to b4, threatening, check and takes. Bishop back to f6, covering that check. This might look innocuous at first sight, but it's actually a pretty dangerous situation for black. After rook c1, threat is also checkmate, but let's say you spot that and go h5. But black will have to remain passive after rook to c6. This will always be a target that has to be defended passively. And this would just be very unpleasant, long suffering, which you don't want against as great a technician as Sergey Karjakin. So Magnus Carlsen, after his blunder, rook to c8, or blunder maybe too strong, but inaccuracy, to his credit, he finds a better defense here. He goes bishop f6, which comes down to pawn sacrifice, but does not lead to as passive a position. Bishop f6, bishop takes f8 is best. If bishop takes c8, then just queen takes d1, rook takes d1, rook takes c8. This is a better version of the line I just showed you, because here the rook controls the c file, so there's not much to do for white. Therefore, bishop takes f8 is the best test. Queen takes d1, rook takes d1, rook takes f8, and bishop takes a6. Here, black is a pawn down, but he has created the so-called opposite color bishops that are famous or infamous for their drawing tendencies. Not always true, especially with rooks on the board. There tends to be a lot of play left, but here after b4, black has another advantage, that his b pawn is sort of single-handedly controlling the white a and b pawn. Therefore, the black drawing chances here are very much intact, and I like this choice much better than going for the endgame I showed you before with equal material. Still, white is a pawn up and has every right to continue playing here. Keep trying. The next couple moves are not too relevant. Both sides consolidate their positions. Rook goes to c2 to cover a2. Black creates a luft. Then a bit of back and forth. Rook to a8, keeping an eye on a2. And here Karjakin, I think, commits a slight inaccuracy, nothing major. But after bishop c4, rook c8, strong move, it's not so easy for him to coordinate his pieces properly. The point is, whenever the rooks get exchanged, the position is a dead draw. So you can never move this bishop, because this is just a total draw. And the rook only has one active way to escape this, to go to the d file. But there will always be challenged by rook d8 instantly, offering the exchange of rooks again. Therefore, after bishop c4, black can easily neutralize the white rook on both open files, and this helps his case a little bit. Still, the game continues. King e2, king e7, f4, grabbing some space. h6, an interesting move. I would instinctively have played h5 to stop g4, but I believe Carlsen has correctly anticipated that g4 is nothing he should try to prevent. I hope this will become clear in a minute. King f3, rook c7, and Karjakin indeed does go for the move g4, grabbing more space on the king side, but I believe this costs him his remaining winning chances. Better try was either here or long term. You don't have to do it immediately. You can start with g3, for example, to go for e4, try to grab more space with e5. Let's say bishop goes somewhere, e5, and then, you know, there is potential in the white position. Can one day prepare g4, f5, maybe h4, h5 could be an option. The black bishop doesn't find it so easy to participate, so the game would definitely have continued for a long time with some winning chances. Maybe Karjakin disliked e4, e5, but even here after g3, at least his bishop gets access to this square. I feel like white has much better chances than in the game. Because after g4, Carlsen correctly replies with g5, and now the white pawns lose all their potential. e4 is no longer an option, because after gf4 you're never going to get this e5, and black can just go rook to c5 and nothing's going to happen. Well, maybe Karjakin was relying on a potential f5, but f5 also doesn't really do anything. Like, even if black just ignores it, goes rook c5, let's say takes, there's no way for white to make any progress here. And Karjakin, probably realizing what he had done, just played king e4, rook c8, and agreed to a draw here, because he could no longer, I'm not sure if he agreed to draw or for the draw, but a draw was agreed here. That's probably the correct phrasing, because Karjakin could no longer spot a winning plan, and I understand, I don't think there is any. After f5 you just wait, put the rook on c5, and it's very unclear how white can ever make any progress. So draw agreed, the 7th draw in a row between Sergey Karjakin and Magnus Carlsen. Another tense game with, not a lot of content, but some strange or slightly strange inaccuracies. After knight c6, I don't think Karjakin's knight d2 will find many followers after that. It was already white who had to be a little careful not to get worse. And Karjakin did that. But then Magnus Carlsen, first of all, he missed the chance to play f5, which might have been a more critical test if white's position really is so solid. And secondly, he made the very strange for his standards mistake rook c8 here, after which he had to fight for a draw, which, to his credit, he achieved without that much trouble. Still, both players continues struggling a bit with the white piece in the opening, not getting anything special. And yeah, it's an encounter that is still very tense, and the narrative is more about the score and the tension than about the new ideas and the quality shown in the games. Still, we have a tie after 7 games, 5 games maximum left, so the proceedings will no doubt heat up. Magnus Carlsen has the white pieces in game number 8, where I hope you join myself and Super Grandmaster Peter Svidler in our commentary. Thank you guys for watching this video, and see you soon. Bye bye. Hang on, let me... No. Bye bye. Sorry, that was a misclick. Bye.